So this is the 2030 hours GMT edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel. It's part B of the broadcast on Saturday, the 19th of August 2023. One of the items that we have noticed featuring Stephen Halsey, the so-called new chief executive appointed by the corrupt Luthuraman in Hrs Council, is on the website My London, and the byline is to Ruby Gregory. And this piece actually says that an investigation has begun into the conduct activities going on inside the homelessness section of the Tower Hamlets Council. It says, and the heading is, let's go to the heading. An investigation has been launched into an East London Council's homelessness department after staff disclosed concerning details about working conditions and warned the housing service was near collapse. Staff working for Tower Hamlets Council's homelessness department had reportedly been given scripts to use when speaking on the phone with homeless people to try and deter them from getting council help. Well, some staff members told The Guardian they had never experienced such dysfunction or chaos. Members of staff had also reportedly, I'll read that again. Members of staff had also reported widespread sickness that had also had a toll on their mental and physical health. During a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, 26th of July, the chief executive of Tower Hamlets Council, Steve Halsey, said the council would not be making any further comment about the independent investigation which is ongoing and criticized the Guardian article as inappropriate. Of course, all these are items that are known to anyone who has been viewing our broadcasts. World exclusively, we have been disclosing reports that are not available even on the Guardian. And this is a first for the Guardian to even have any critical item about the misconduct and dysfunction going on in Tower Hamlets Council. So Ruby Gregory says, Mr. Halsey said, our position about well-being of staff is a significant issue to me in my role and to the mayor in his. We will be taking appropriate steps to ensure staff that were impacted by an article that I believe was inappropriate and does not take into account the pressures that London is facing generally and in relation to what is described as the housing crisis was not adequately reflected in this article. Now, this is a very convoluted statement, completely corruptly conceived and corruptly constructed. And Stephen Halsey was interim chief executive more than 10 years ago when he left. And we shall be talking about Stephen Halsey and Tower Hamlets Council's homelessness department. The homelessness department of Tower Hamlets Council singularly has been the one section of the council that has got complete corruption about it. And the only place that has published facts about the corruption, questions about the corruption, the impact and implications of the corruption has been the Khoodeelaar campaign. And my question to the full council on in January 2013, that is more than 10 years ago, was about Tower Hamlets Council failing to audit the Tower Hamlets community housing and to do anything about the status of the housing stock, etc., etc. But that question was, because the question had been available to the council for more than a month before the actual day that the council meeting took place in January 2013, it was the subject of a detailed sabotage operation by the council, despite the fact that the ceremonial chair, who was the speaker, was a member of the Labour Party, whereas the post holder in the post of executive mayor was Luthu Rahman, who was not a Labour Party member. They collided, they colluded and they conspired to sabotage my question, which was addressed to the so called housing cabinet member Rabina Khan. So, all the issues that are now surfacing more than 10 years later had been discussed, raised by me, but sabotaged by the Tower Hamlets Council, sabotaged by the liar Luthu Rahman, and sabotaged by the entire council, despite the fact that the Labour Party was in opposition and was not part of the administration fronted by Luthu Rahman and didn't have to support anything. If it was wrong, and it was wrong, everything that the Tower Hamlets Council fronted by Luthu Rahman being done in 2013 was wrong. So 10 years later, the UK central government has admitted that Tower Hamlets community housing doesn't have the basic capacity to deliver housing, manage housing, and the THCH has itself now started the process to give over to Popla Harkar, the criminal organization, whatever housing stock it has, the Tower Hamlets community housing. So, my question was sabotaged, and I have discussed this before, but in light of the latest developments, which is the first set of fact-based developments since my question in January 2013, the updates will be contained in a dedicated edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel program. But let's just take a look at my question as listed on the order paper for that meeting in January 2013. So that meeting was not in January, that was in June. I made a mistake because I confused the month because I was thinking about Bob Neal's debate about the monitoring officers that was held in January 2013. So on 26th of June 2013, my question, and at that date in June 2013, Stephen Halsey was in post as the corporate director of communities, localities, and culture. So the first question listed under to receive written questions from members of the public. The first question was from me, and the decision they say question from Mr. Muhammad Haq regarding arrangements for auditing and overseeing the conduct of bodies now responsible for formerly council owned and council controlled housing stock. Now, this is my question as listed. Question from Mr. Muhammad Haq, organizer, the Khoodeelaar campaign in defense of the community in the East End of London. What is Tower Hamlets Council's constitutionally installed, transparently, democratically active audit procedure for overseeing the conduct of those bodies, especially the ones that have been allowed to take over the control of formerly council owned and council controlled housing stock? In the context of the clear and the express undertaking given by London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council to the community and parts of the community in the borough on the relevant estates affected by the implications of the stock transfer procedures that were put into operation? Now, that question was the one that concerned the THCH and Poplar Harka, amongst others, and it was the target of sabotage. That sabotage took place with the complicity of the woman who was chairing the meeting as the speaker. And Rabina Khan lied through her teeth when she allegedly gave a reply which was absolute rubbish. Total pack of lies. And that question, when it was being put, formally put in at the meeting by myself was interrupted because the council sitting was interrupted by the chair, who said that a person, a member of the public, was filming the event, the meeting. The person is the person John White, who is a whopping resident, and he was filming, as he said on film later during the suspension of the council meeting, when I filmed him outside the Mulberry Place, that he was only triggered to film by my question. So, what we shall be doing is to take a detailed look at the series of lies that Luthuraman perpetrated, Rabina Khan perpetrated, and the rest of the Timeless Council bureaucracy perpetrated about housing. So, when Ruby Gregory publishes in My News, My London, the alleged statement taken from the Guardian report, which is itself a rarity, alleged statement by Stephen Halsey, who is now 10 years later in the post of permanent chief executive, that Stephen Halsey said that the Guardian article was inappropriate. It is complete, absolute lie. Guardian article is tip of the iceberg, not inappropriate, but it is only a tip of the iceberg. So this is the item on the Guardian website that Ruby Gregory is referring to. It's homelessness, and it's a chaos. Star Hamlets housing service near collapse with families housed in bed and breakfast. It says there are 166,000 homeless Londoners living in temporary accommodation. And this picture is credited to Mike Kemp. An East London council has left homeless families living in hotels for months. because its housing service is near collapse, according to a number of staff members who work there. And it is actually published in the Observer. The Observer understands from multiple employees the Tar Council employs inadequately trained staff to work in the department, and that these workers have been issued with scripts to use on the phone to try to put homeless people off seeking council help. Now, this is just tip of the iceberg, as I said. Stephen Halsey is the liar that lied during his particular limited involvement in the correspondence with me while he was employed in a relevant capacity more than 10 years ago. So for him to say that the reference by the Guardian to these lies and frauds that are taking place is a reference that is inappropriate, is a complete lie itself. So corruption, the corruption by Tower Hamlets Council in intentionally briefing employees in the homeless section to tell lies to callers, homeless callers, is a crime. And yet, there is no evidence that the council has been prosecuted on any of the crimes it has committed. And the Guardian is only inappropriate, to use the same word as Stephen Halsey has used, but for different reason. The Guardian is only running an inappropriate story because it is telling less than the truth. Now, today's weekend edition of the Communist Party, Great Britain, Morning Star, this is the weekend edition, covering 19th of August and 20th of August, which is today Saturday and tomorrow Sunday. The main heading on the front page is, of course, about children. Now, how would that fit in the camera, before the camera? That's the nearest it can come. Britain's shame, 120,000 kids now destitute. Now, this is a piece by MATILDAS, and it says Charity Buttle UK reveals rising number of children suffering in most extreme form of poverty. Now, this is only a tip of the iceberg again. More than 120,000 children across Britain are living in the most extreme form of poverty, according to a charity survey which reveals the situation is worsening. The devastating rise in levels of destitution was branded stark and worrying by Buttle UK, which works with young people in crisis. Its poll of 1,240 frontline professionals found that 6 in 10 of the children they work with are experiencing extreme poverty, up from 45% the previous year and 16% in 2021. The London based charity, which published its annual State of Child Poverty report yesterday, said the families our frontline workers are supporting includes approximately 122,000 children living in destitution. The year-on-year change between the last three survey cohorts dramatically illustrates the progressively worsening circumstances for children in poverty. The organization Buttle UK described the term destitution as referring to the absolute lowest standard of living any adult, child, or young person can experience, leading to a lived reality which is degrading and unsustainable. Specifically, its study said that someone is considered destitute if they have gone a month without at least two of the following: shelter, food, lighting, heating, clothing, or basic toiletries. Bottle's chief executive, Joseph House, stressed the survey demonstrates the catastrophic impact of the COVID 19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis. He warned that of the families his team are trying to help, more than half are unable to afford enough food and nutrition, gas, and electricity bills. Basic furniture and IT equipment for education and employment, such as mobiles and laptops, etc. etc. Now, today's weekend edition of the Independent also has the front page splash about this. This is the only Fleet Street paper. The Morning Star is not considered a Fleet Street paper because it is not featured in any lists they publish calling the items unlisted as British newspapers. So the only Fleet Street paper that has the same issue based on the same report by Battle UK is the in I newspaper, which has got the heading Generation of Young People in Poor Areas Left Behind. A level results gap between wealthier and more deprived regions continues to widen amid lingering impact of pandemic on students. Parts of the northeast of England and Yorkshire and the Humber have also seen teenagers' marks drop since 2019 with fewer A's and AS. Students at private schools are twice as likely to obtain top grades as their peers in the state education after gulf growing during COVID 19. Now, this is not today's independent, this is yesterday's independent. Today's independent is a different one, which is this one, the worst child serial killer in modern history. No, this is not the one that we're talking about. So it's the wrong one. The I newspaper has report by Bartle UK that I earlier suggested it had done. Now there is a lot of coverage in the papers about the aspect of the behavior of the Chester Hospital, which which was told which was told that the babies were being murdered by the nurse, and it took action against those who reported that, demanding apologies from those who raised the concern. And it didn't contact the police for more than a year after the reports were suppressed. The initial reports were suppressed about the fact that she was on a murdering, massacring spree. Now, if you extrapolate the behavior of Chester Hospital in suppressing the concerns of the whistleblowers and apply the same attitude to other organizations in the United Kingdom, including most of the hospitals, you can see how the National Health Service is being turned into national sickness creating, murder causing institutions. That's one. The other is that the judiciary, the corruption of the judiciary, in the judiciary, through the judiciary, is done by the licensing authorities that issue licenses for practice as licensed law traders. For example, the England and Wales Law Society, which is responsible for issuing licenses to those who are called solicitors, and the bar, there are four Inns of Courts: Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, Inner Temple, and Middle Temple. So the organization that actually issues the licenses for those who are then eligible thereby to practice as licensed barristers, they are doing the same things as the Chester Hospital executives were doing when wrongdoing by members of the profession was brought to their attention. They wanted to hide the fact, and they wanted to, as they claimed, as has been revealed now, reduce and the possibility of reputational losses to the organization if the information that there was a nurse let loose in the hospital committing murders at the same time, that the hospital was hiding the fact that she was committing massacres. Now extrapolate that and include the behavior of solicitors, barristers who misbehave, misrepresent the claims of clients, and deny the clients the say. What is the consequence? The consequence is that the solicitors and barristers then become complicit in creating wrongs and wrongdoing, illegalities. And anyone like Judith Goodman, who was a deputy district judge in London's Clerkenwell County Court in 2011, Judith Goodman and Henrietta Manners. Henrietta Manners was a senior full-time judge in that particular area. She had been a judge in the Shoreditch County Court, which later merged with Clerkenwell County Court and became jointly known as Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court. So Henrietta Manners and Judith Goodman typify two of the judges in action in London, and they had, among the caseloads that they actually dealt with, they had some of the highest numbers of cases to do with evictions, repossessions, and 99% of the cases that were contested by the affected people, affected by the eviction, repossession applications, were allowed without the victims being allowed to speak, to represent the actual truth of what was going on. So when Judith Goodman did that in a case involving Tower Hamlets community housing in 2011, Judith Goodman refused to hear the evidence of the misconduct by Tower Hamlets community housing. Remember, Tower Hamlets Council community housing featured in my question to Tower Hamlets Council dated the 26th of June 2013. And it is Tower Hamlets Council that was complicit with Tower Hamlets and the criminal employed in Tower Hamlets Council who was complicit with the criminals at Tower Hamlets Community Housing was the criminal called Stephen Hill. The criminal Stephen Hill was the criminal in the post as the benefits manager. And between him and the so-called chief executive at the time in the Tower Hamlets Community Housing, THCH, Mike the racist criminal liar Tyrrell, Mike Tyrrell and Steve Hill conspired to create a pretext so that Mike Tyrrell would follow Steve Hill's actions that were wrong and wrongly initiated and phrased and couched by issuing eviction notices that he knew were wrong, but he went ahead and issued the eviction notice. And Steve Hill knew that he was lying when he claimed that the tenant was in arrears, rent arrears, because the tenant wasn't in rent arrears, because the tenant was entitled to housing benefit based on the evidence of the tenant's income, which had not changed for years. So there was no reason, there was no basis for any even remote suggestion that circumstances had changed. They hadn't. So over several years, Steve Hill, the benefits manager in Tower Hamlets Council, conspired with Tower Hamlets Community Housing and Mike Tyrrell to create a series of lies and pretexts, claiming, wrongly claiming, factually, untruthfully claiming that there had been rent arrears. And based on their untruthful claim that there had been rent arrears, that is created by Steve Hill, Mike Tyrrell then issued possession proceedings. These facts are absolutely central. And yet, in the hearing, that actually took place in November 2011. Judith Goodman refused to hear the facts, the evidence. And before the hearing, attempts had been made by the tenant to get representation by the Tower Hamlets Law Center, which was still in existence on that date at that time. But the Tower Hamlets Law Center at that time was mainly dominated by a racist South African woman who created a problem, thus sabotaging the straightforward, otherwise straightforward case of the particular tenant being represented at the hearing, which meant that a licensed law trader called Lucy Green, Lucy Lucie, Green Green, Lucy Green, as a licensed law trading solicitor, and Edward Fitzpatrick as the licensed barrister were, quote, hired supposedly to represent the evidence which the tenant alone knew. But both of those, Lucy Green and Edward Fitzpatrick, had a meeting, illegal meeting, about the particular case without the tenant being present. They had a meeting with somebody called Lucy Rogers, Lucy Rogers, Rogers. Lucy Rogers had no right whatsoever to be present, let alone to speak to either of the licensed law trading solicitor or the licensed law trading barrister. But she obviously did. Because by the time the tenant arrived at the meeting, so called, the licensed law trading barrister, Edric, said to the tenant, "Don't worry, I am not related to Jim Fitzpatrick." Now, that was the first time that the licensed law trading barrister ever met the client that he was supposed to be representing. How on earth had he such a precise insight into the psychology of the tenant about Jim Fitzpatrick? And who asked Edward Fitzpatrick to, quote, reassure the tenant that he, Edward Fitzpatrick, was not related to Jim Fitzpatrick? So that was an illegal meeting, and that was a meeting that fucked up the briefing, the so called instruction that the tenant alone was entitled to give to the lawyers, and the tenant alone knew the implications of everything. So when the actual hearing started with Judith Goodman, the deputy district judge, in the chair, it was completely, from the word go, it was hostile against the tenant, hostile against the evidence, hostile against the procedures, hostile against all the published rules governing the instruction to solicitors and barristers. The Tower Hamlets community housing was represented by a licensed law trader called Alan Lane. Alan Lane was a racist liar who asked a racist question, inappropriate question, about the tenants' dealings with the racist involved in the obstructions at the Tower Hamlets Law Center. So you can see Tower Hamlets Law Center, the licensed law trading barrister Ellen Lane, Tower Hamlets Community Housing, the licensed law trader Edward Fitzpatrick, the licensed law trading solicitor Lucy Green, and a completely irrelevant individual taking over the personality, the role of the tenant completely illegally, without the knowledge, the consent, the agreement of the tenant, Lucy Rogers. So all of them had already created the background, if you like, to Judith Goodman, the deputy district judge, proceeding to make a series of completely untruthful, illegal, corrupt, and prejudiced and biased statements which had nothing to do with the facts, not a single fact. The telephone conversation, the relevant telephone conversation that was recorded by the tenant was unlawfully, illegally, without the consent, without the permission, without the agreement of the tenant, allegedly transcribed by Lucy Rogers, who made a mistake. Not only that, she aggravated that mistake by handing over the so called transcript to Edward Fitzpatrick, who then gave it to the racist Judith Goodman, who proceeded to add further distortions to the script. She did not play the tape because the actual voice on the tape and the actual words that Lucy Rogers created were contradictory. So none of this could be made available on the record to the court because Judith Goodman was obstructing. And in the history of the cases that Henrietta Manners had presided over between local council and landlords as landlord and the targeted tenants, the subject of possession order evictions. 99% of the cases went in favor of the proceedings to evict. There was no evidence that supported that. There was no law that supported that high rate, high number of evictions being granted by Henrietta Manners. So when the tenant told Edward Fitzpatrick that the behavior of Judith Goodman was contrary to Article 6, the lack of fair trial, Edward Fitzpatrick made the most stupid response. He said that the behavior of Judith Goodman was based on the perception she had of the tenant's demeanor. Now, there is no legal concept called demeanor that constitutes a wrong. So, what we are looking at in the context context of the revelation, part revelation in The Guardian, retailed by Ruby Gregory in the My London website, about Harmless Council lying to its untrained employees in the housing department to tell lies to the callers, homeless callers, in order to deter homeless callers from seeking help, let alone receiving help that they were entitled to, in order to prevent homelessness affecting them, is a tip of the iceberg. And it's a tip of the iceberg that is engulfing and sinking literally hundreds of thousands of people, individuals as well as members of the families. And of course, hundreds of thousands of children are being destroyed. We shall be talking about all of those. You can see that this is world exclusive, original, investigative update on timeless community housing, on Popla Harka, on the licensed law trading barrister Alan Lane, on the licensed law trading barrister Edward Fitzpatrick, on the licensed law trading solicitor Lucy Green, on the deputy district judge and also a solicitor Judith Goodman, on the licensed law trading barrister and county court judge Henrietta Manners, and a completely interfering, unlawfully interfering individual obstructing the tenant's rights by pretending to be the tenant's representative at the meeting, instruction meeting, Lucy Rogers. We shall be talking about all of these in further specific factual details and spelling out the impact and the actual caused costs and damages and losses caused by these illegalities, corruption, and wrongdoing by the legal bureaucracies.